RBX, right? When I did my interview with him, he said that Tupac, he'll still be alive if he had the same people around him that he had in Oakland. What you think about him saying that?
One, when it's your time to die, is your time to go. You know what I mean? But I think I get where he coming from because but you people gotta know Pop personality. Because he even when he was around his homies like Mike Cooley, Man, you know what I mean? He did have some like solid Oakland dudes around him at one particular time. But even when they was around him, Pop personality was always the type of, even he was the youngest, but he was always doing what he wanted to do. And I think that's why some of the reasons why they had to step back. You know what I mean? So, when it's your time, it's your time. But because of the personality of Pac, his characteristic, you know what I mean, is what led him to do what he had to do, what led up to what happened to him. So I don't think it was the people that around him. It's just that he was an individual that, you know what I mean, he was hot-headed and at the same time he was cool-headed. Like he had that balance, you know what I mean? But sometimes he just did what he wanted. Nobody can. And I remember I watched an interview a long time ago with Big Sight. Big Sight, you know what I mean, man? Really missed that dude. Solid dude. You know what I mean? He was one of the last dudes that stick with Pac. You know what I mean? And Big Sight, he mentioned something in an interview where he was like, we was Pac big homies. He said, but our fault was that when we was around Pac, he was always trying to be the big homie. Like he was always trying to push, like because of his characteristic, he was always the one to want to call the shots, and he didn't want to listen to us. You know what I mean? And Big Syke was saying we wish that we would have been a little more firm with him on that, but that's because that's how his personality was.
And speaking of Big Sight, since he was a Crip, that's another thing that RBX said in our interview. He said that Tupac, at first, he had a whole lot of Crips around him, but when he got to Death Row, they was nowhere to be found.
No, that's true. Like even when I met Pac and when we used to come to LA, it was all Crips. You know what I mean? His circle was all Crips, but he always was you know what I mean? I think he had Manute, shout out to Manute, shout out to, like, he had some solid dudes around him. But I think the Death Row situation was so intense that if these individuals would have been coming up to Death Row, like I said, because the Bloods that Suge had around him, they was very active and wild dudes. You know what I mean? And if Manute and all of them, it's not like Pot just cut them off. But like Country told me, he said Big Syke, most of the Crips that was around Pac was from Big Syke homies. They was from South Central and they was from Inglewood that Big Syke was around. And Country told me, said Big Syke purposely used to say, don't come up here. Big Syke used to leave him out purposely. It wasn't really Pac. Big Syke and Country said Big Syke said because they up here tripping, basically in gang term, like, it's gonna pop because Big Syke did have some homies that if they was around here and you got these Bloods, tripping and you got these Crips, it definitely would have been clashes. So Syke, like I said, Syke was always more diplomatic. You know what I mean? He wasn't looking at it like he put his pride, his understanding of gangs aside so that he can hold Pac down. But you got some individual, they don't even care. You know what I mean? From both sides, that they might see a person wearing a certain color and might bang on him. So he had some wild Crips around him that it was a chance that if they was hanging around Death Row with him, being around Suge wild homies, bro, I think it would have been crazy.
Yeah, it definitely would have got crazy up there, man. You might be right about that. Because I know Big Syke and all them Crips, they would have never allowed Suge Knight to punk them. So, yeah, you might be right, man. It would have got crazy.
Yeah, Syke was more diplomatic. You know what I mean? Bogart was more diplomatic. But if you bring in other dudes, it would pop off. You know what I mean? It would pop off. So I think it was one incident where you know what I mean? I think that the time that they probably did come up there, uh I think one of Suge Big Syke homie, it might have been Country. I think Country said he was on the phone in Death Row and Heron said something to him and they kind of got into it. And that's when Big Syke was like, please don't come up here, man, because they tripping. I think, something gonna pop off. Shout out to Heron was a crazy dude too. Like so with the personality, like people like a Heron, you know what I mean? And the people like Buntry, like these real solid dudes from Suge Hood and Trey and them. Even though Trey was more relaxed and calm, but he still was like he was a rider. You know what I mean? He was the youngest from that crew, but he was definitely a person that people respected and knew that he wasn't no joke as well. Then you had Big Syke with these dudes that he had. I think the wise thing was just to say stay home. You know what I mean? And I think that was a good call from Big Syke. It was like a mature call.